Hey there, everybody. This is Ed, and welcome back to another edition of Bagel and Booze. We've hit the month of March. It's the month of the Irish. It's St. Patrick's Day. So with that, we're going to be celebrating out all things Irish with a couple reviews this week and upcoming, hopefully if we can sneak them in, of beers that are either from Ireland or Irish themed. And our first one for this week is actually one that does come from Ireland. So we're going to go hardcore. We'll go straight in and get an Irish beer lined up. No, it's not Guinness. That'd be too obvious to do. Maybe we'll save that for St. Patrick's Day. But again, we're just going to try to get you out some reviews, some stuff maybe you haven't seen or tasted before. We're just going to make it up as we go, just like we always do on Bagel and Booze. For today's beer review, like I said, it is a beer that is coming out from Ireland. It's not Guinness, but what we have for today for review, it's an Irish red ale, and it is from Sullivan's Brewing Company out of Kilkenny, Ireland, and it is their Maltings Irish Ale. Irish red ale, wow, that's used here. It's a term that's really rarely used in Ireland. Probably the most famous red ale that you would get out of Ireland is by none other of Smithwick's, and you never really see them using that term. The red color of this ale comes out from the use of roasted barley versus caramel malts that the Irish brewers were kind of forced to employ back in the day when they were trying to take on their interpretation of a brew that was popular at the end of the 19th century, which was called bitters. Caramel malts were way more expensive, and with that, they obviously want to go on the cheaper side and employ cost-saving techniques, so they ended up using these roasted barleys. That's exactly what gives it that kind of that dark red color that comes out of that. Irish red ale, like I said, it's a term that's used here more than in Ireland. They just don't really use the term, if at all, from what I could find out. And even at that, it's a newer, quote-unquote, newer term that comes in, and didn't really gain popularity until the 1980s when interest in specialty beers began and Coors introduced George Killian's Irish Red Ale. Coincidentally, that Irish Red Ale is not actually an ale. That beer that they released is a lager. There was actually an actual Killian's family that brewed what was called an Anacorthy Ruby Ale until about the 1950s, and then the rights with this fell under to market under George Killian's name, went to and were sold to a brewery in France, which was then acquired by Coors, hence why Coors threw it up there. But with that, you think that was the more you know moment, but that's not. I had thought about going down a whole thing about Irish Red and, a lot more about kind of what goes into it, but I'm going to go just like we did with last week with Omegang and the brewery name. This week's The More You Know is kind of about Sullivan's and kind of just some of the history with that name, and it was kind of some stuff that surprised me when I found out interest. So without no further ado, it's time for The More You Know. So as I said, with this The More You Know moment, or moments, as we get a little long-winded sometimes, is about with the name of the brewery and kind of just Sullivan's in and of itself. This beer, the Maltings, is actually named for a location in Kilkenny, Ireland, where a William Sullivan first began brewing beer in 1810. But Sullivan as a brewery was established actually way before that, almost a century prior to that, in 1702 by Richard Sullivan. It was one of the two most famous breweries out of Kilkenny. Obviously, the other one being, if you didn't know it, is Smithwick's, which was established in 1710. Sullivan's would have probably held the title of the oldest brewery in Ireland, which Smithwick's, it's a moniker that they kind of hold and tout. You know, Smithwick's, while popular, probably is not as popular as Guinness beer, but Guinness is not the oldest brewery. They're probably one of the most famous, but they're not the oldest. Obviously, they came in, if memory stands correct, and I should know this, I think it was 1759. So these two breweries predated by almost half a century. Like I said, Sullivan's probably would have held the title of the world's oldest brewery because, again, it had been pretty popular because around the turn of the 18th century, there were only two breweries, and it was these two powerhouses that were continuing to brew throughout that century, throughout the 1800s. And they did a very robust business despite being set up just across the street from each other in Kilkenny on James Street. They would have held this probably, if not for when, according to legend, in 1918. And the name is a little tough to track down, but as best as I could find it, it was a James Sullivan. He literally bet the house, or I guess we could say the brewery, on a failed horse wager at a race in Deauville, France. Supposedly he was trying to woo some French aristocrat. He put out a huge wager against another aristocrat that was in that area. Because of the debt was so huge, he either had to face this count in a duel, because that was, your word was your honor back then, or he would have to pay up. Not wanting to risk death in a duel, they paid up the debt, and the brewery was supposedly sold to pay these debts. Smithwick's had assumed all the operations, including the name, to trade and brew as Sullivan's, into their own brewing operations. And Sullivan's kind of falls into the dustbin of history. 1965, Smithwick's is then purchased by Guinness, later renamed as Diageo, who in 2014, around 2012, 2014, there's some back and forth in some of the papers that are there. I guess I could really do some extra lookup on that, but for the articles that I looked at, they relocated Smithwick's from Kilkenny to Dublin, Ireland. This ending about nearly 800, as they tout it, but in reality, probably about 600, because the monks that were there weren't brewing, as from what people could tell, in the 1200s. They didn't really start brewing until the 1400s. And it ended nearly 800, 600, however you want to look at it, years of brewing traditions in Kilkenny. In 2016, this name, Sullivan's Brewing, it gets revived by some of the brainchilds at Smithwick's as a way to kind of pay tribute to that city's rich and long brewing history. That's kind of the roundabout way of how we get into Sullivan's. Looking at it, I'm thinking it's been around for a while. It has been around for a while, but not really. So this is a new beer that is an old beer. And as we say, old things are new again. So that therein is kind of the more you know moment.
I drink and I know things.
So we got everything all poured out. As you kind of see, it sets up really nice. It's got a good, nice, stable, thick head that is on this beer. It has a nice dark ruby color that we would expect off of as we said, with this type of beer. Guess we'll give it the old sniff test. I'm not really expecting much off of the way of a smell. It's not marketed as anything being of a flavor profile that's in there, but we'll still give it the good old standard sniff test. Just as I expected, I ain't getting much of a smell, so we'll go ahead and give it the old taste test. Nothing overpowering on it. It's just standard kind of flavor profile that I would get. It's a very easy, smooth, drinkable beer. It's just a standard, which run of the mill. I know it's not necessarily run of the mill, but it's just kind of from a flavor profile. It's just very kind of standard. Nothing's jumping out. It's very easy to drink off of that initial taste. It's just that. It's kind of just on its own. It's an ale. Um, we're not getting too much that comes in off of it. From a sit down at the beer. I say it doesn't wow me, but then again, it's definitely not one that I'm not gonna drink. Sitting down at a bar, or even just sitting around, whatever. It's definitely one could crack open, have a few of these. It's very easy going. I don't get any real, you know, bad taste out of it. So I guess with that, there's not really much that we can find fault against this one. Across the board, it's a easy drinking, sippable beer. It definitely is one that works. I can see it working with a lot of different things. You know, it doesn't purport to be anything else outside. It just puts it in as a red ale. Just looking at it, they don't even put anything in off of it. Off of a flavor profile. It's just a standard malt profile that comes in on it. I guess for a rating, I'm going to go ahead and I will give it a 4. Like I said, it's a good beer. There's not much to be found wrong with it. So I can't see any reason as to why we really should, mark it down any lower. Granted, like I said, it is kind of run of the mill, but with that, I don't think it really should dock it too many points in connection with that. So if you're looking for a good, easy beer that's an alternative to, drinking out, Guinness for the St. Patrick's Day coming up, you want to try something, outside of the norm from Smithwick's, which other people may be drinking for a lighter ale, I definitely recommend this. I'm out and I can find it, I'm going to be looking to purchase this. With that, I guess it's time to figure out, because we still have about a half a pint left, is if it will chug. Okay, so it's about time to figure out if this beer is going to be chuggable. I'm going to go out on a limb and probably answer that question based upon our initial taste test and say we probably are going to be able to chug it. There wasn't anything really kind of jumping out from the flavor profile that would kind of sway us either way. With this guy, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to, but we got to do it and we got to figure out will it chug. So bottoms up. So yes, it does. It is chuggable. Again, I would not expect it not to be. I don't really get any changes in regards to flavor profile that's in there. It's nothing that really is intense. Nothing really changed in regards to that profile that had expected it not to change. Because again, we weren't pushing any type of flavors. It's just kind of your standard red ale. They're not doing anything wild and wonderful with it. I guess if you notice, I did have a Guinness. Said it wasn't Guinness, but in a roundabout way, Sullivan's is Guinness because it was reintroduced by Smithwick's, and Smithwick's is controlled by Guinness. So I guess I lied, and we did do a Guinness type beer, even though it's not Guinness. But in any event, with that, I'm done. This is done. We're done. And I thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you click that subscribe button, and we will catch you back for another edition of Bagel and Booze. Thanks.